All right. Okay. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. Just in the interest of everybody's time, want to thank you for joining. Uh, my name is Bo Hoffman. I'm a consultant with the Joe Carroll Local Redevelopment Authority, and I'm joined here by um, Mara, Rob, and Hannah, who are going to be representing as well as Peter Smith, who's another consultant like myself. Um, just so you know, this webinar is being recorded. So if you do not wish to have your voice or question uh, heard, please stay on mute. We would ask you to stay on mute for the duration of the presentation, just in the interest of background noise and things like that. We will be posting these slides as well to the website that you found the RFP link, so that you can download those. I'm going to kick it over to Rob Davies, who is one of the directors of the Joe Carroll Depot Local Redevelopment Authority, and we will get this presentation started.
Thanks very much, Bo. Thanks everybody for jumping on. Thanks for your interest in the project. Maybe just to start off with, let's quickly run through what our order is going to be. Can you skip a slide for us there, Bo, please? Thanks. Yeah, so just quickly, we'll do an overview of the Savannah Industrial Park, the Joe Carroll Depot Local Redevelopment Authority, and then get into the objectives of the RFP. Bo will run you guys through that. We think it's an interesting project, and hopefully there's something here that we can put together and bring some proper economic development to our site. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. So just a quick overview of the Savannah Industrial Park. This site is massive, 13,000 acres. It was a former Army munitions depot from 1918. BRAC started in 1995 here at the site. It officially closed in 2000. Of the 13,000 acres, we've got 10,000 acres as US Fish and Wildlife Refuge. It's the entire northern section of the former depot. What we're looking at for development is all centered in what we call the lower post. It's kind of the southern part of the former depot. There's about 3,000 industrial use acres there. A variety of tenants, mostly doing the larger landowners, doing third-party logistics and also rail. We've got 72 miles of rail inside the depot. And we have 400 acres specifically earmarked for port-related development, which is kind of where this project plugs in. We'd like to bring natural gas distribution into areas of that 400 acres that we're working on for port-related and also industrial development. Of the tenants that we currently have on site, we've got grain handling, we've got logistics, rail and related, and by related, cleaning, rail cars, scrapping, and also fixing rail cars, kind of heavy industrial. We also have some small manufacturing on site, and our aim for the industrial park is to locate a large industrial or agribusiness unit user, something like a soybean processor, to come out to the site. We've identified soybean processing as a pretty critical development node for our area. There's not a lot of soy processing happening here, and we think we're in a sweet little pocket where we can, if we bring a soy processor in here, we can make stuff happen on the agribusiness side and farmers, but then also push the water side development on the port barge side. A lot of this is creating opportunity in the industrial park for us to push more water side development, and of course vice versa. The key for us is to get both, any mode that we can, really working properly. The site is really good for cluster manufacturing, stuff like welding, fabrication, barge repair, anything to do with on the maritime side. We're also looking at it definitely for small industrial use. where we can bring businesses that have a symbiotic relationship, together and see how we can cluster them properly. Presently, there's no natural gas service at the site. All the tenants use propane. We've spoken to some tenants who have expressed a desire to switch over to natural gas. So we think that there might be a user base to begin with that that can give us something to kick it off from in terms of tenants currently on site. Next slide, please. This is a rendering or I guess a map drawing of what we call the LRA's Parcel 20 reuse. This shows what we envisage this site to look like once it is developed fully. If we start in the right-hand bottom corner, you'll see along Apple River Island we have some barges staged, and then there's a dock right on the side there, kind of close to the shoreline of the depot itself or of the Savannah Industrial Park. It takes a conveyor up into the middle of the site where we have a flat area that we're going to be looking at doing container storage, also light industrial, lift on, lift off. We've got a dry dock in there, barge repair, etc. And then moving further north, we've got the grain handling facilities. On the left, we've also got wind energy components, a yard for that, quite a bit of rail development, and then we have our energy cluster kind of in the middle of the map there, where and we'll get into this later on, where we're looking at a renewable energy facility, which would be symbiotic with what we're trying to do here with the natural gas distribution. But that should give you a fairly good idea of the extent of what we think the development will be over time, and how critical it is that what we're doing with the distribution kind of ties into what our plan is for the site. Next slide, please. So just a quick overview of the two organizations on site. We have the Joe Carroll Depot Local Redevelopment Authority, which is Mara Roche, the Executive Director. I'm Rob Davies, I'm the Deputy Director. Anna College is our Administrative Assistant. And we are the staff for the Joe Carroll Local Redevelopment Authority, the Depot Local Redevelopment Authority. We're tasked to transfer and develop the industrial park property, the 400 acres that I mentioned earlier. That's what we're here to do. And then the Upper Mississippi River International Port District, which is Mara Roche, who is the Executive Director, Rob Davies, the Deputy Director, and Anna College, the Administrative Assistant. We're tasked to develop the public ports facility at Savannah Industrial Park. So our direction from the state is to develop a public port facility here at the site. On the UMRIPD side, we have port master planning and capital improvement projects underway. We got $7 million from the state of Illinois for port development. The master planning is almost completed, and we have started purchasing property under the capital improvements project. So we've got 3 or 4 properties that are in the process. 2 of them have already been completed, and then the next batch will be that industrial park property that you saw in the map, the middle section. Our on-site projects are supported by Illinois Department of Transportation, Illinois DCO, of course, for this project, the Illinois EPA, the Clean Port Grant, the Department of Energy, of which we'll talk a little bit later on, the Department of Defense, and the Maritime Administration. We have wide support throughout state and federal agencies for what we're trying to accomplish here. I'm going to talk a little bit about the DOE grant. That is a grant that the LRA received through congressionally directed funding. It's for the renewable energy project. We're looking to create a source of renewable natural gas. If that, and we're hoping that project and this project can coexist properly and create benefits for everybody. Our main drivers are economic development, job creation, and workforce development. We're in an area that's not particularly economically healthy. The loss of the army pulling out of the area was massive, and then also rail changed quite a bit over the years. So our area is impoverished, and this will be a great economic engine if we can get it going, which I guess points to why there's such wide support both at state and federal level for what we're trying to accomplish. Our goal is to develop a 21st century intermodal facility. That means best practice as green, if you want to call it that, as we possibly can make it, simply because we are in the refuge. It's beautiful out here. We think that there are ways to do a port development using best practice to make it fit in properly. Supporting infrastructure, exactly the same. Ultimately, what we think of the location is that it's an ideal facility to have all the modes coming together here, but then also to build out an energy hub for future fuels for 30 or 40 years from now, to make this a hub for not only commerce, surface transportation, but also keep in mind how energy plays a role in all of that. So it's a fun project, it's a fun site, and we hope that we can work with all of you to help us get some natural gas distribution here. It's the bedrock on which we have to build out the development, and at present we don't have it. Bo, over to you. Thanks.
Yeah, great. Yeah, thanks, Rob. So I'm going to talk through a little bit about the more detailed objectives of this RFP, and everything from the schedule to the content to the ultimate evaluation. So we're envisioning this RFP and the eventual bid winner or bid winners to engage in a project that spans 3 phases. Those are shown at the bottom right. So as far as scope, we would request a plan, design package, engineering, permitting, building, and operation of a local natural gas pipeline distribution system for the industrial park. So within that 400 acres that Rob mentioned earlier, as well as delivery of natural gas for the term of the agreement. We're looking at 5 years for initial delivery term, with kind of first right of refusal to extend that to the awarded entity. We envision a couple of different approaches, and I'm going to go into these in more detail. One option that we're exploring is a virtual pipeline approach with trucked in CNG, LNG, or RNG. At present, it's not feasible in the timeline that we're looking for to do barge delivered fuel, but that is something maybe in the long term that we would consider. We could also envision a traditional gas interconnection along Highway 84. I'm going to talk a little bit about why that hasn't happened to date, but again, that's something we are certainly open to. So as I mentioned, 3 phases to the eventual project: a planning, engineering, design, and permitting phase, then a procurement, construction, and commissioning phase, and then the operation and gas delivery phase of the project. So one thing I just want to, I already talked about the top half of this slide, but do want to mention something as it relates to the state grant. So as Rob mentioned, funding for this particular project, this infrastructure project, is coming from the state of Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. That was a project that was selected in January of this year. So that's going to be the source of funds that the local redevelopment authority provides. As part of that, proposers are going to be required to contribute a 20% cost share, and that could be either cash cost share or in kind. And those costs, as well as the costs that will be funded with the DCEO funds, They do need to comply with bondability requirements um, and other like CFR regulations. We have a copy of the bondability requirements at the back end of the RFP in case anybody's wondering what those are, but those cover most everything that we're talking about in terms of like this stage of planning, engineering, design, um, and construction. One thing that is not covered under bondability is equipment rentals. So for instance, we could envision a vendor coming through with a rental of a skid. That particular skid rental would not be a bondable cost, but again, I just give that as a specific example. So certainly pay attention to that if you're interested in this RFP. So as far as what the application entails, we are asking for a notification of intent to participate by next Friday, the 26th of September, just so we have an idea of how many entities are considering this. That just can be a simple email to the RFP mailbox that's shown there or that's on the website. At that time, again, that's all that's required. For the full application, which is due at the end of October, there are several application materials. So the technical volume, which is the technical description of your project, what you envision, and then several attachments. Most of these are probably going to be pretty straightforward, but I will highlight later in this presentation the trade-off analysis, and then attachment D refers to that cost share requirement I referred to earlier. So we do want to make sure that any entity that's considering applying or bidding for this RFP understands that that cost share requirement is a firm requirement that's not negotiable. A timeline here. So we're here at the pre-proposal conference. We have our proposal intent deadline that I mentioned coming up the end of next week. We are fielding questions both through the RFP mailbox and through this webinar. Any questions that get asked on today's webinar will be posted. We commit to posting answers to all those questions in a public but scrubbed fashion no later than the 7th of October. So we'll post those in the form of a spreadsheet on the website. RFP responses are due at 5 p.m. Eastern on the 31st of October. And we anticipate making our selection in late November or early December with contract execution and negotiation in early March. Through the phases of the project that we're envisioning, and I'll show this on a Gantt chart here shortly, our hope is to have an in-service date for those resources by July of 2027. So this is kind of a Gantt chart of how these various stages fit together. As I mentioned, phase one is that planning work. So once we've completed contract negotiations in the early part of 2026 calendar year, we're envisioning about several months of planning. And what we're talking about in planning there is helping us kind of scope out the size of this particular facility and the demand needs. So we put in a base estimation of decatherms or MMBTUs per day that we envision, but we would certainly welcome the expertise of the winning bid to help us, make sure that that's the right size for the types of tenants we're envisioning, and the scale of these types of systems. From there, we envision about a 6-month design and engineering phase, and then a 6 to 12-month construction phase and gas delivery in the 2027 time horizon. So I alluded to this earlier, and Rob mentioned this as well. So, big motivation for this is the fact that there is no natural gas service to the industrial park. So as you can imagine, that does create a major challenge in attracting new tenants for development. And ultimately, the LRA's the goal is to create economic opportunity and development at the site. So Illinois DCO certainly realized this, and again, we're gracious in giving us this grant to support this type of work. We've done prior feasibility studies going back to 2018 to kind of estimate the infrastructure needs of this 400 acres. Those feasibility studies estimate about 24,000 lateral feet of pipe needed within the property limits to service the current and future tenants. And so that's what we're talking about when we say like local distribution network. And then recently we've done some assessment of demand for the types of expectant tenants and variability throughout the year. So right now our notional peak demand that we expect would be about 400 million BTUs per day in the winter, or for instance, if you had a soybean crush at like the major part of the year when the crush is occurring in the fall. And then, during lower peak demand, such as like the summer, we would anticipate, the system-wide demand being closer to 230 million BTU. So we're requesting that at a minimum, the gas delivery in that in-service date would be that minimum amount. But again, this is why we have that planning phase to assess the proper size for this type of system. For the virtual pipeline projects, if that's what you're proposing, it is critical to us that we have adequate storage capacity on site to provide at least a few days backup. We certainly defer to your expertise about like what the right cadence of delivery or the right sizing of that storage would be. So again, we're not prescriptive on saying, oh, it has to be 2 weeks of storage or 5 days or things like that. We'll certainly defer to your the way your business operates. So various resources and systems that we're considering here. So we could envision interconnection to the main natural gas line. The site is currently not, it's currently about 8 miles to the nearest natural gas main line. And that's detailed in with more granularity in the RFP. But that has been cost prohibitive from a traditional extension. Because of that, we do envision the opportunity for delivery and storage of RNG, CNG, or LNG. So we certainly want natural gas demand. Hopefully we've made that clear. But as part of this, we're also open to other non-pipeline alternatives that could meet demand both on the supply side and the demand side. So those could be things like geothermal heat pumps, electrification, combined heat and power systems, and other things that can, or smart meters, for instance, that could help with demand response for the industrial park or its tenants. So as I've alluded to a number of times, it is a possibility to do an extension to the existing natural gas service line. Probably the more affordable way to do this would be to the north because that is closer, but I guess not necessarily. And so as we consider these various proposals that we expect to receive, one of the components of the application, this is attachment A, that we're asking, and it's a requirement, is for our proposers to perform a simple trade-off analysis. So I'll talk about the extent to which this is part of the evaluation criteria later, but we're envisioning a short semi-quantitative and qualitative trade-off analysis that considers various sustainability metrics. So that could be the economics of the project, that could be the environmental performance, workforce development, things like that. We have some examples of metrics in the RFP, but again, this is really up to you to portray, what is the value proposition of the option that you're bringing forth. So we're not going to be prescriptive. The only one that is an absolute requirement is, we have to understand what the capital cost and the delivered fuel costs would be once operational. Everything else, it's up to the proposers to decide what metrics are most appropriate for them. So evaluation criteria, this is a best value proposal process. And so we have a total of 100 points that we're going to be allocating across 5 different criterion. There's more detail on these in the RFP. So 30 points towards the technical approach and work plan, 15 points for the trade-off analysis that I just mentioned, 10% for the schedule and the milestones, specifically the schedule adhering to what we're asking for, 25 points for experience on similar projects and past performance, including performance with state or federal grants. And then lastly, 20 points for the reasonableness of your budget. So, again, we reserve the right to select one, some, or none of the proposals of this. So this is creating no obligation to execute a contract. Would certainly encourage everyone to read the terms and conditions in full, but I wanted to highlight a few that are specifically relevant to this particular RFP. Since this is going to be funded with state of Illinois funds, there are several laws that the winning entities must adhere to in terms of prevailing wages, workforce, and since this is a public works project, where some of those workers are their state of residence. There are quarterly reporting and monitoring requirements in terms of like the financials and things like that. That's standard for any state and federal grant. There are standards about cost principles in terms of their reasonableness, allowableness, and allocability, as well as bondability. And so, for those who aren't familiar, those can be found in their entirety in 2 CFR 200. Importantly, we understand that cost recovery is a standard practice when it comes to these types of gas distribution infrastructure projects. Cost recovery is allowed, but we understand that it has to be in adherence with Illinois Commerce Commission regulations, and we would ask that a mock-up of that be included in the proposal documents. And I think that's it for that slide. So with that, we can take any questions, and you can either put those into the chat or come off mute, or feel free to email the RFP mailbox if something comes up after. So I'll pause there and open the floor. And if anybody's having an issue like coming off mute, please let me know, and I can do it from my end.
Where can we get a copy of this PowerPoint? Did you say we could find it online?
Yes, we'll be posting it onto the same RFP landing page that the full RFP is located. So we'll be doing that probably later today.
Okay.
Yep.
I can also email it to you, Chris, if you like. We can just email it to you too.
That'd be perfect. Thank you.
Sure.
So at the end of this 5-year period, I take it operations and supply of uh, the alternative fuel source would be open for bid to other entities to take over at that time?
Potentially, yes. We are giving a preferred option to at that 5-year time point to the winning proposer. So that is detailed in the RFP. But for instance, if let's take a hypothetical scenario where I'll do two just to kind of play out some options here. One scenario that we could envision is that as part of this, a CNG system is installed at the industrial park, and so that includes the decompression skid, the storage, as well as all of the gas distribution infrastructure from that storage system to the various tenants. So that at the end of that 5-year period, the CNG company delivering or the virtual pipeline company delivering that CNG or LNG could change. We would again offer an option to the entity that has the incumbent service. So that's kind of one scenario. Another scenario, and this is common within the virtual pipeline space, is that the storage and decompression systems are rented. So at that point, we could potentially do first right of refusal on extending that virtual pipeline service to that entity. So, this is the type of thing that we certainly will have to, discuss during negotiation, depending on what the exact nature of the business model is. But that's what we're envisioning, and we do want to reflect that, the entity that that comes in at this point, we do want to give them that option at the end of that 5-year term, if we are continuing to receive gas service. I hope that answers the question.
Partially, because there's also the operation and maintenance aspect of an LNG facility. So would that be up for contract again after that 5-year period, as long as well as with the virtual pipeline?
That's right. That's the intent.
Is there any flexibility to extend that contract to, like, let's say a 10 or 15 year, which would probably be a little bit more consistent with what we do in LNG?
I'll kick that over to Rob and Mara and see what they think.
I think if the proposal can outline what the benefit is of that, and if it's a compelling proposal, then I can't see why we wouldn't want to look at it. I think it's, especially for us, the strength of the proposal and what that benefit looks like for us over time, or the relationship looks like over time, I think is very critical. So I'm not going to say no to that. I think let's look at what comes out and make a decision from there. As Bo said, let's see what's on the table and negotiate.
Yeah, is it because when you talk about cost recovery, there's a lot of opportunity in a 10 and 15 year supply contract and O&M contract, but at a 5-year interval, I mean, immediately out the gate, that would, deter us from wanting to execute a proposal for a project like this. So if it's flexible and possible, then that would potentially revive some interest in our group. And then there's a lot of capital equipment investment that has to go into this, even on the way of the virtual pipeline and transportation. And so appreciate you answering that question. The other question I had is, can you elaborate on some of this cost share? Because, that's a bit of a question mark still within our group is, what are we really providing that money for? And how do we get that back? And again, hearkening back to that 5-year contract, where do we see our return on that?
Yeah. So The cost share is it's 20% of the minimum of 20% of the total project cost, which would include the state funds of $3 million. And actually, let me put this a different way. The 20% has to be based on the amount of funding that the state provided. So we're presuming that everyone is going to request at least $3 million for the scope of these projects. So in practicality, the minimum cost share is $750,000, which if you do the math, there's an appendix that kind of shows this, that works out to be 20% of that amount. So things that cost share can be used for, as I mentioned, that can be in the form of what's called cash. And that's just standard like business operations that essentially an entity is, they're still, paying their staff, or they're still, purchasing this piece of equipment or something like that. So like money is still transferring hands for anything that is within the scope of the project. So that could be things like, again, equipment, salaries, it could be operation costs, it can be permitting, it can be things like that. The only things it can't be used for are like things like profit, or like overhead costs that aren't previously like negotiated. And so then again, that just becomes a base. And our understanding in discussions with the state DCEO is that, we understand those become like sunk costs that can be part of the cost recovery mechanism later on. So in other words, they're kind of a donation to the project up front, in other words.
Right.
So that was cash cost share. Another form of cost share is in-kind cost share, where that is a, to use a very generic term, a donation to the project. So that would be, for instance, if you were donating a person's time, maybe like 100 hours of their time for whatever reason. It's pretty uncommon that in-kind cost share is actually used. Most people end up doing cash cost share, but really in-kind is like kind of pro bono, or donated time or effort. Does that answer your question on cost share? There's a lot of additional information that we can post in the Q&A on examples and things that you can find on this.
Yeah, more examples would absolutely be great, but I think the in-kind, that makes more sense to me if like I said, a contract was a lengthier contract in which we could donate in-kind services to it. And so I appreciate that. I think that clarifies some of my questions there.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. That your point about the length of the service contract and the length is well taken. So yeah, appreciate that. Thanks.
Yep. And just one last thing, the expected BTU per day, let's call that, say, for a fall winter season and spring summer season, is that firm? Because what we'll run into likely is a lot of LNG suppliers are going to be kind of a take or pay basis, and so forecasting what those load requirements are going to be is going to be very key to servicing a site like this. So that being said, are you aware of that take or pay kind of strategy from the LNG suppliers? And that meaning that if those expectations are lower or forecasting is wrong on the requirement side, that, we'd still end up charging that alternative fuel based on, our contracts with our LNG suppliers?
Yes. So that's really what's envisioned during the earliest phase of the project in that planning. Let me go back to the Gantt chart slide. Actually, I'll start here. So during this phase one, this first like 6 months, part of that planning is really to firm up like what is the amount of decatherms we need per day. So that number is negotiable. Our estimate, and it is an estimate, is that our spring summer need would be 230. And we certainly understand that, you know, the way those contracts are written is that is like, that's what you're paying. And if you don't use it, then effectively, I don't know what the exact term of art you used, but yes, we understand that like if we didn't use that full demand, or like we'd only drawn down a certain amount of storage, that that as an entity that we're still paying for that certain amount. But absolutely, just to reiterate, demand planning is something that we are asking for assistance with as part of the start of this project.
Okay. And I suppose I can save this for in-depth RFIs going forward. I'm just curious that it, you know, since the intent is to grow out what seems like some of the industrial users in the area, and that demand goes up, will there be adequate state funding or other to support the growth of, you know, let's say an LNG site that's being built based on the 400 million BTU per day, you know, which depending on the right industrial end user could, you know, 3 or 4x quickly.
Yeah, just in my discussions or our discussions with the Maritime Administration, the Department of Transportation, both locally and at federal level, I think there's wide support for the project. And I think if we have something that's working and we need to expand, I don't think we'll have a problem accessing funding for it.
Okay, thank you. That's everything from me.
Yeah, thanks.
Cheers.
Any other questions? Okay, well, hearing none, I just want to again thank you for your time and your attention today. And again, you know, if you come up with questions after the fact, feel free to email them to the RFP mailbox. We will post those as soon as we can shortly after. We're gonna also post the questions we got today, just so that others who couldn't attend, you know, can get access to the same information. Rob or Mara, anything else before we adjourn for today?
No, thank you for attending this workshop, and we look forward to your responses.
Yeah, thanks very much, everybody. Really appreciate you taking the time. Look forward to seeing your proposals, and hope to get something moving here. Thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks,
so much.
Chris.
Thank you.